Hello, viewers. This is Dr. Kamar Chima, and today I'm going to talk about India's course of diplomacy towards Maldives and Pakistan. This is a very interesting question that how India has been using course of diplomacy. For example, in case of Maldives, India used all the non-traditional means against Maldives, and I think that is going to be considered as one of the primary and textbook example in that case where how India has been using civil society, social media, Bollywood actors, and despite the fact there is no response from the state authorities, only the response came from the foreign office and not from the political actors, but how India deterred Maldives, and Maldives had to suspend three of its ministers when they used the derogatory remarks against Prime Minister Modi. On the contrary, if you just look at Pakistan, just recently, you might have heard that the former High Commissioner of India towards Pakistan, Mr. Ajay Bisari, wrote a book about Pakistan, and the book basically is about the anger management, the troubled diplomatic relations between India and Pakistan, where he tells that 9 missiles were installed towards Pakistan. And these 9 missiles were, this information was shared by, at that time, by Pakistan's diplomat towards to the ambassadors in Islamabad. So I think these are some of the examples, and I really want to talk on that. For example, if you just look at the course of diplomacy, the course of diplomacy is, for instance, is about threatening the political consequences to the adversary. At the same time, course of diplomacy is about expulsion from the international organizations or the regional organizations. For example, if you just look at from India-Pakistan lens, you will see that India did say back a few years back when Pakistan was about to host the SAARC summit, India didn't come to Pakistan for the SAARC summit. India didn't let other countries to come in Pakistan. So that was basically one of the way which India used against Pakistan. On the other hand, if you just look at that. There is a possibility of economic sanctions that is also taken as a course of diplomacy. On the Maldives side, it was very much initiative that was taken by the civil society, by the Bollywood actors, that we are not going to go to Maldives and we are not going to contribute towards the economy of the Maldives. So many people thought that we should not travel to Maldives because that is a sort of a strong nationalist aspiration from the people of India against the unnecessary and uncalled for remarks that came from the Maldives ministers. So this economic sanction or this sort of a traveling embargo from the people of India basically deterred Maldives not to deterred Maldives to suspend its ministers, and that created a debate and discussion within the Maldives that India has been a good friend of Pakistan, of Maldives. India has been a good friend of the people of Maldives, so we should not do so. So this economic sanctions is basically is sort of a course of diplomacy. At the same time, the expulsion from the international organization or the regional organization or boycotting the SAARC is another example against Pakistan. On the other hand, if you just look at, for example, from the suspension of an economic agreement is another example of the course of diplomacy. If you remember, after this Pulwama incident, India did say to Pakistan that we are going to take away the most favorite nation status, which was given to Pakistan long ago. Although Pakistan, if you remember, didn't give this MFN status to India because the right-wing elements, particularly at that time, Hafiz Saeed and his party and many of other Islamist elements didn't want to start a trade with India. But India did suspend, India did got back the most favored nation status, which gave it to Pakistan a few years back. So that was basically another coercive measure or a coercive diplomatic move or maneuvering by India towards Pakistan. At the same time, the use of force is also, in fact, called as a course of diplomacy. But remember, the course of diplomacy is basically is considered as an alternative to the military action. What Mr. Ajay Bisaria just recently told and said in his book, which later Prime Minister Modi in one of his speech said that Qatal ki Raat, mean the night of bloodshed, we would have attacked Pakistan, we would have sent missiles, because at that time Pakistan's intelligence agencies had this information, and Pakistan and this information was shared by the intelligence agencies to the Foreign Office. Foreign Office communicated to the foreign ambassadors. So this was how the High Commissioner Ajay Bisaria told the entire story. Although Pakistan's version is very clear on this, that although this version has not come from the political side, from the diplomatic side till now, but Pakistan says that for the sake of peace in the region, for the sake of stability in the region, we did return the pilot. It was not about the threats which were coming from India, or it was not about the 9 missiles. So normally, this course of diplomacy is, as I mentioned earlier, is an alternative to the military action. It is basically this course of diplomacy is based on the threat of force rather than the use of the force. So you threaten your adversary, you don't use force, because at the end of the day, you want to change the behavior, or you want that other to comply with your wishes. So India's wish was to return the pilot back. India's return was not to use the force. Had India, used the force, the reaction would have been different. For instance, India did use force in terms of Balakot incident, where India did surgical strike, where Pakistan believes the trees were damaged and there were no hideouts of the militants there. But in that response, Pakistan also targeted in Indian occupied Kashmir. Pakistan did target in India. So if India would have used the force, Pakistan would have used the force. But India didn't want to use the force. India only wanted to go for a course of diplomacy, where, and as I mentioned earlier, course of diplomacy is in reality is alternative to the military action. So I think these are some of the examples from that lens. And furthermore, if you just look at course of diplomacy is basically a defensive strategy. It is a strategy that is used to. This is not an offensive strategy. It is a defensive strategy, and it is a sort of a blackmailing, you can call it. Otherwise, if the blackmail is about to tell the adversary to behave or to comply as per the wishes. And course of diplomacy is also, is about, as I mentioned, you have to distinguish it from deterrence as well, because deterrence is something else. So, in my understanding, what I believe, India has been very much able enough and capable enough to use the course of diplomacy towards Pakistan and towards Maldives. As I mentioned earlier, towards Pakistan, the course of diplomacy is about use of force, threatening of use of the force, but not using the force, but you communicate, you give the message in a way that the adversary would comply. But in my understanding, the political parties in Pakistan, they either gave wrong signaling to India, or they just said what Indians wanted to say. For example, if you remember, at that time, one of Pakistan's member parliament, Mr. Ayaz Sadiq, who's from PMLN, he said that in one of the meeting, the leadership was very worried. They were sweating. So I think these were things which were used by the Indians and they took it as an understanding that our course of diplomacy has worked on the military and the politicians. And if you look at that time, Imran Khan was the prime minister. So the Imran Khan, in reality, wanted to talk to Narendra Modi, and he returned the pilot. Narendra Modi didn't speak, but Imran Khan still returned the pilot. So many people realize that the courts of diplomacy has in fact worked. This course of diplomacy is used by many actors, but in India and in Pakistan's case, both the countries have been using courts of diplomacy. But in my today's conversation, that how India has been using courts of diplomacy against Maldives and Pakistan, there is a reality, and that reality is that India did use courts of diplomacy against Maldives through a non-traditional means. They didn't ask for formally boycotting Maldives from state level, but society did say. As I mentioned earlier, Bollywood actors, as I mentioned earlier, the civil society, media, they all came forward. The media wing of the political parties, they came forward in that way. So Narendra Modi is using all tools in his arsenal to make an impact. And he doesn't have to say much on many accounts. He doesn't have to say much on many accounts, as majority of the things are either said by the like-minded elements within the media who are very close to Prime Minister Modi, or even the powerful members of the civil society who believe that we need right-wing Hindu nationalist government for reshaping the idea of India, because India is going through transformation, for instance, where they want that we should be called as a Bharat, not India. Just recently, the Minister for External Affairs, Dr. Jaishankar, wrote a book where he said that why Bharat matters. He didn't say why India matters. So there is a large section of Indian society in different parts, in different areas, either in the Bollywood, media, and other academia. They do believe that they need to protect Narendra Modi and his party because they are doing a noble cause of protecting India's image, promoting India's image globally, and also protecting India's sovereignty. Thank you very much for watching this show of mine. And this is a new discussion which I have started for my English channel, NHS Media. Please do subscribe. Thank you very much.